Hey there, Dan Hadaway, managing partner of Infotex, and I'm here to kind of go over the feedback we've been getting. Again, this is kind of a regular thing for us. We call it the You Spoke, We Listened clip that we insert into various webinar movies and that sort of thing. And so we're proud of the fact that most of our really good ideas come from our clients. Actually, I'd have to say all of them. Don't get me wrong, we have a lot of good ideas too, but we hardly ever get to them because our clients have better ideas, right? And so our clients asked us to put together an inventory of all the state laws that banks need to comply with if you're in the middle of a breach. You know, these are the laws that say, hey, you need to notify this, you notify that, you need to do it in a certain amount of time or whatever. And hopefully the law has an exemption for financial institutions complying with federal regulations, which the law in Indiana currently does. And so, we like the law in Indiana, but if there's a breach in Florida, we need to pull down the law for Florida and find out if we're supposed to notify our customers. If we have customers that live in Florida, and most banks have customers that have addresses at least for 6 or 5 or 4 months of the year in Florida. And so just so you know, we're right now in kind of the middle of a funky game where we're trying to figure out what alias to use, and we're actually kind of concluding that we should just use a whole bunch of aliases. And what we're talking about here is that if you're in a panic, if you're in a, and hopefully you'll have a link to our page here, and we're going to try to keep this up to date. We're only updating it once a year. If you just know, hey, breachlaw.infotex.com, that might be easier to remember than trying to hunt it down by going to our website and searching for it or whatever. So anyway, I feel like we've done a pretty good job of responding to our customers' requests there. We're really excited about that. You really need to check it out. It's going to be very handy if you ever have a breach that affects customers that are outside of Indiana or Ohio. We also have been requested, I don't know why, because I do really, all my videos are non-technical, but no, just kidding. Surely, we've got a whole cast of characters at Infotex that are very technical people, and I can lasso them down and get them to give us a little bit of a talk. And so Michael Hartkey, he's our moderator, very happy to start releasing a series of talks about our SIEM. And so if you're a managed security services client, you definitely ought to check this video out anyway. And by the way, we think that you can take print screens from it and put it in your technical security standards, so that if auditors start asking, it's easier for you to explain why and how and that sort of thing related to your relationship with us as we watch your network. But even if you're not a managed services client of Infotex, please know that this is probably the way the data flows in almost every installation of IDS and IPS and ELM, whether your vendor calls it a SIEM or a SIM or whatever. We also had requests, now these keep coming in, to make our movies shorter, and so we were really proud of an 8-minute movie I did, and then Mike came in and he did a 5-minute movie, and now we're working on a 3-minute movie for the IBA's Technology Security Conference, or the Cybersecurity Conference. That's a virtual conference. It's on October 1st and 2nd, by the way. I hope to see you there. And then finally, we also had some input that Dan should learn how to play something besides a harmonica. And so let me just say that that's why I've been, working on this little device here. It's an Aboriginal flute, I think, and I'm starting to learn how to play it here. Give me a little bit, maybe by our November webinar, I'll be able to play it. But let's give her a try anyway.
Our lawyers want you to know that when you attend any of our webinars or watch any of our movies, you're agreeing to the terms of service located at the link on the screen. We're also required to provide this abbreviation of what our terms of service include. The main point we need to get across is that regulations change on a regular basis, and we want you to know that what we present can sometimes be very time-dated information or our own interpretation of new guidance or regulations. The materials we present today are subject to change. Also, whenever we provide free boilerplates as part of our webinars or movies, we're required to point out our transfer of copyright agreement, which is also located on our website in our IT resources library. You can read it by going to the link on the screen. Please also note, by attending an infotex webinar or by receiving any infotex movie, you may be added to our mailing list. We apologize if you'd rather not receive notice of other free education. You can always opt out at the link on the screen. And now, it is our pleasure to introduce to you our webinar moderator, the code curator and special envoy from the SEAM, Michael Hartke.
Hello everybody, my name is Michael Hartke. I'm the curator of code here at Infotex and your moderator. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. We'd like to point out destinations on our website, webinars.infotex.com, where you can find our upcoming webinar topics and event schedule, and then also movies.infotex.com, where you can find the movies of these webinars and training videos. And now, I'd like to introduce the speaker of today's event, the awareness guru from Indiana, the breaker of tech and enforcer of policy. He has 13 letters after his name, and they all spell risk management. Dan Hadaway. Dan?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Michael. Welcome everybody. I hope everybody can see my screen. I'm assuming since Brian isn't yelling at me, I'm showing the right screen here. And our webinar for October is a standard annual webinar. We do this webinar every year. Usually it's after we're done with the conference season is what we've taken to call it, which of course this year we're not really completely done. There's still a IBA mega conference coming up. There's still a couple events at the Ohio Bankers League that we participate in. And so we decided to go ahead and just stick to the schedule. I know a lot of people are trying to work on their technology plans, updating their budgets and that sort of thing. And so even though we don't have all the conference information in our tactical plan alternatives, we are charging forth with this year's technology planning webinar, which this year we're really excited because it's going to be a panel discussion. I've been able to lasso and rope a couple bankers into talking to me about their technology planning process and what they're seeing on the horizon in 2021 and that sort of thing. And so I guess I probably should have been, explaining that like Mike said, I have 13 letters after my name, but more importantly, I've been managing Infotex for the 20 years of our existence. And throughout the whole time, technology planning was really one of the big things that we felt banks should be doing. But fortunately for us, in 2013, the management guidance was published by the FFIEC, the Federal Financial Institution Examination Council. And it basically established that we need to follow a certain process in order to compile technology plans on an annual basis. We kind of helped it scale down to our clients or community-based banks. But ever since then, for the last 7 years, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20, 6 years, I guess, we've been doing a webinar on technology planning. And then again, it's kind of evolved into a movie. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to summarize the 2016 movie. We'll get you a link if you haven't seen that movie yet, so that we can quickly get to the panel discussion. Hopefully the last half hour of this webinar will be bankers discussing technology planning with my moderation. And so this month's shout out, of course, goes to the panelists, and you're welcome to turn your camera on now. If you can't, that's fine. We'll want you to turn them on. There's Christy. Hi, Christy. I think Roger actually might be to a meeting that he's been straddling, has been telling me about. But yeah, I definitely want to make sure that we appreciate, show gratitude to Roger and Christy. There's, by the way, I don't know if you noticed, but this session is being recorded.
If you want to volunteer to be on a panel, or if you just want to chime in when we get to the panel discussion, let Brian know. You can raise your hand, or you can chat Brian, or I'm pretty sure he'll be able to unmute you, and we'd love to hear what you have to say as well, especially once we get to that point. I also want to thank, he can't be here because he's on a vacation. He actually volunteered to come out from vacation for this webinar, and I said, no, Adam, your work is done. He's the one, our lead non-technical auditor, that compiled this year's tactical plan alternative spreadsheet. Again, if you've been watching this webinar year after year, you know what we're talking about. If not, don't worry about it, because that's going to be the basis of our panel discussion. What we're going to be discussing will be tactics that we have identified in these conferences that we've been attending, that you might want to consider as part of your 2021 or 2022 technology planning. And so the typical agenda then is really what we want to go through is the prerequisites. In other words, what should you know about technology planning in order to be a banker who's involved in technology planning? So we're going to talk about guidance, that sort of thing, right? Then we're going to dive into the tactical plan alternative spreadsheet that we've compiled based on the conferences we've been to so far, and then we'll have that panel discussion. But I really do want to stress that we realize that it all depends on the size of your bank. The larger banks have minions of people, right, that they can bring into the technology planning process. Our very small banks, our credit union clients, anybody who's just getting started on the process, of course, you're going to have to take a walk before we run approach, and really keeping it simple is the goal of the day. We feel compelled to provide you all the information we can, but your job really is as cybersecurity superheroes is to try to boil this down to what applies to your specific bank in 2021 or 2022. And yes, I'm known for my spreadsheets. Michael Harkey will sometimes introduce me as the spreadsheet guy or whatever. I can't remember, but yes, there is a spreadsheet that this is going to be organized around. And your job as an information security officer of a smaller financial institution is to try to take this spreadsheet and make it work for your situation, your organization, your committee, whatever approach you take. And so what I'm really looking forward to is that Roger and Christy will be able to talk to us about their approach and their small bank, so that we can hear more than just what Dan has to say about it. Now, what Dan does have to say about it is based in part on guidance. But it really is has a little bit of a twist. And what we decided is, since we're doing this every year and the guidance hasn't really changed materially, at least related to technology planning, since about 2013, when that management guidance was published, what we've taken to doing for the last couple of years at least is just referring you back to the movie from our 2016 webinar. And so, and hang on before you leave. I still feel like you'll love the panel discussion, because that's where we actually talk about what should we consider in 2021. But how to go about considering it is, something that we hope you're already developing on your own anyway. If you watch that movie, we'll dive into some details. I'm actually going to summarize it here in the first part of this webinar. But suffice it to say that what we teach in this webinar is based on a book that I read way back when I was in college. I require our new employees here at Infotex to read it. It helps put us all on the same page about the creative design process. And the whole who, what, where, when, and why of technology planning can fit into the design process if we see it as a journey. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but if you watch that movie, I think it makes sense to you. We talk about the top down and bottom up approach that, you're going to have audit findings that'll make it in your technology plan, whether you agree with them or not, right? Or whether you think they're high enough priority, maybe is better, because most of us agree with our audit findings. What we don't agree with is that they're a higher priority than the other work we already have planned sometimes. Well, whether we like that or not, we still have to analyze and try to figure out how that fits into the priorities and such like that. So that would be the top down. The bottom up approach would be our management teams going to conferences on a regular basis, and they're coming back saying, hey, the Internet of Things is really cool. We need to get it. We need to get it yesterday. And we don't need a risk assessment for this. It's the Internet of Things or whatever. So we have guidance and policies and procedures that kind of help arm the information security officer with the big stop sign. And I know that's the way the management team sometimes sees us, but we want to slow the process down and make sure that we're thinking it through, et cetera, et cetera. But then also we talked about the tactical plan alternative spreadsheet, which is really going to be the cusp of today's presentation. I'm not going to drill down into a lot of weeds. I'll bring up some of the guidance slides here, but I do want to stress a couple concepts in that movie that you want to make sure I feel like your management team needs to understand. And that starts with the nature of when. I would be talking to my management team about Everett Rogers' diffusion of innovations theory that was first published in 1962 that still applies today. I mean, we get our language from that book. And it always goes without saying, but we want to remind the management team when they're putting pressure on us to adapt technologies that might make us a little bit more competitive and a lot less safer or whatever, that, hey, if we wait around and really, I mean, what we're talking about here is if we wait around for half of the market to invest in this first, we're going to end up with the technology that has a lot less problems, a lower price, and their features and sophistication are going to be safer and better and what people expect and all that sort of thing. And so goes without saying, but it's something that I encourage you to say to your management team when it's time to kick off your technology planning process on an annual basis. We also talk about the nature of how do you balance, what we sometimes feel we don't have a choice over with, what we're getting pressured about on a regular basis. And that striking that balance is really what the tactical plan alternative analysis is supposed to help you do. It's supposed to help give you a paper trail as to why we might not agree with management or implement a management, idea or whatever exactly when they came home from that conference. But the key takeaways then is that technology planning is another awareness training process, in our opinion. We never commit to our plans to the point where they're written in stone, right? It's more aware of what's not in the plan. And so we write our plans in October, November, December, whenever we finalize, we commit to them. We make a commitment to our commitment in January. And by March, there's that new idea nobody thought of. And guess what? Being aware that, hey, this wasn't in our plan, we feel helps us slow down a little bit, measure the risk, make a decision. Do we want to change our plan? If this plan that we worked on in the fall was so well worked on and well thought out and well designed, why are we changing it already in February or March or whatever? So that's one of the big takeaways. The next takeaway in that movie is there's a 7-step journey for those of us who, whether we're already technology planning or not, to consider. It's based on the Universal Traveler, which is the book I already told you about. And then finally, we talk about the establishment of 3 lists. And so I really want to kind of dive down that in just a little bit more detail, which, what we're basically saying, you're going to see a spreadsheet here that's listing out, 40, 50 ideas that we gathered from the conferences. And so what we're talking about is a process where we reduce that 40-some, item list down to 25 statements or less, that this is what we're committing to in 2021. I've been saying 2022, by the way, and the reason why is I've gotten some feedback from one of the panelists that couldn't make it, basically said, just so you know, we're planning on pulling up 2019 this year, because we feel like we're a late majority adopter and all the ideas you had last year might be, applicable to this year. But that's really what we're talking about is based on what we think our vision for information technology is. What's our strategy? What 5 or 8 things should we be really focused in on in the next couple of years in order to achieve this vision? And then what should our tactical plan, what should be the 25 things we're making a commitment to in order to help us realize that strategy, which will help us live our vision. That's the theory, right? Now, there's all kinds of guidance surrounding the FFIEC, and when I show you the deliverables that you'll be able to download for free, by the way, for those of you who aren't regular attendees of our webinar, I want to make sure I stress that any of the boilerplates we're talking about here, you get for free. But the point being is that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the guidance. We do have a guidance summary. I don't think a lot's changed since October of 2019. I told our guidance summary guy he didn't have to update it this year. It's a lot of work, but we basically have created a 9-point audit checklist, and I'll show you that in the deliverables as well. And really, the rest of this part of the webinar is just kind of going over those checklist items. And I'm not going to read the screens to you, so I'm assuming that if you already have a process in place that you're happy with, you probably won't even look at that. But if an auditor, an examiner has said, hey, you might want to take your technology planning to the next step, that checklist will at least help you compare what you're doing now to what's in the guidance. It's what we use when we audit banks, and we're focusing in on their strategic planning. So if we have in our audit plan for you to focus in on and take a look at your strategic plan, we're first of all making sure it aligns to the guidance, and that's the checklist that we use for that. The main thing that the guidance says, though, is that your technology plan should help your information security operations align with the business plan of the bank. And so, of course, one of the top-down issues we're always faced with is, does the bank have a business plan? And fortunately, enterprise risk management is requiring, the people higher in pay grade than a lot of IT people to pull together a business plan for the bank, but it might not be updated annually. And so, that's kind of one of the things you need to start on, right away is what should we be doing about the fact that we have or don't have a business plan? Where can I get that? And then the next step really is to, how does our IT strategy align with the business plan? In other words, how do we make sure that what we're doing at a high level IT-wise helps us get closer to what the bank wants to do as a business? And so the tactical plan is what we're going to do this year in order to live that strategy, in order to realize that strategy. The strategy usually can span a couple of years. We might modify it on the edges or whatever, but the infotex strategy, as an example, for 2021 is going to look very similar than it did for 2020, which looked kind of similar than it did for 2019. Not that we weren't adding new stuff to the plan, not that we weren't crossing everything off the list, and we were crossing a lot off the list, but there were still a lot of strategy statements that were going to take longer than 2 to 3 years to achieve, or that we would never cross off a list. A great example of that is that I'm pretty sure your bank's business plan says we'll be as good as we can on customer service, and your bank strategy probably says customer service is one of the ways we live up to our business plan. You're never going to cross customer service off the list, but it might be something we're focusing in on this year. And maybe our tactics are to give every customer an evaluation form of our customer service, right? And so that's a good example of how that works. And then what the guidance is requiring is the IT operational plan. Our movie does go into that, but over the years, we've kind of felt like this is more for the bigger banks. Most of our smaller banks are still not doing this. And that's all we're going to say about that. The guidance then kind of dives into, these are the actual audit checklist paragraphs, by the way. And I'm not, again, going to spend as much time on that other than I would like to take you out and show you what we have out there in our deliverables. And so I'm assuming that Sophia or Brian or somebody has chatted everybody a link to a zip file. When you download that, you will see, and sorry that I can't make this any larger. I guess I could if I change the view to, to a medium icon or maybe some large icons, but I don't like the way that looks. So the producers of the movie hate it when I do what I just did there, by the way. But suffice it to say, there's the guidance summary I was talking to you about. It's just a Word document where we've compiled everything that the FFIEC.gov website set up out technology planning on October 7, 2019. If you don't have policy language addressing technology plan, we've got that in there for you. There is a sample IT strategy. This is from 2016. So if you're seeing, anything in here that looks old, well, it's from 2016. What I'm finding kind of interesting is that in 2016, a lot of what we were saying, the conferences were suggesting that we add into our technology plan for 2017. A lot of community banks are actually putting those ideas into their plan in 2020 and 2021. And so, that's that Everett Rogers diffusion theory of innovation, where we're not all going to adopt at the same time. And then there's also a sample tactical plan. We have this document here in case authentication risk assessments become something that we're required to do. I think I heard somebody, Brian, are we just getting the panelists ready, or did somebody have a question?
I think it's just getting ready.
Okay, all right, great. And then finally in that is the cusp of this, what we're really going to spend the rest of the webinar talking about, which is the tactical plan alternatives. And so I just want to bring this spreadsheet up at a high level. I'm not going to actually work from this spreadsheet because I got another one queued up. But this is what we update every year. And by the way, I can't remember if I'm pretty sure that that we've included the last 3 years worth of this document in our deliverables.
Yes, we have. We have.
All right, great, Brian. Appreciate that. And then we also put the brochure for the cybersecurity conference in here, but we didn't put the brochure for the OBL conference. I don't know if that's worth looking at now, other than you can see that these are the talks that at least the IBA's tactical alternatives were derived from. So you can see a little bit about the speakers and that sort of thing. But what we do then on an annual basis is that, and I used to do it myself, I'm very happy to have delegated that to Adam Reynolds, our lead non-technical auditor, who's on vacation now. And what he did, though, is that he attended those conferences, and as there were ideas that came up that he felt were potential tactics for 2021, he would document them in the spreadsheet. And the theory is if you wanted to, you can go back and map them back to your strategy statements, and you'd be able to, blah, blah, blah. And just so you know, we have some samples in this. Once again, you might, if you're a late majority adopter, you might want to go back to 2017 and see what the tactical alternatives were then. I'm not exactly sure, because I don't know specifically where you are in your technology plan, which needs to be customized completely to your organization. Once again, we're trapping our information security officer clients in a spreadsheet. I really already kind of walked through that spreadsheet to a certain degree, but now what I want to do is I want to, kind of talk to you a little bit about the use of the spreadsheet. I was not surprised because I kind of figured it. I figured that people kind of liked it from my, hey, this is Dan's taking all the notes from the conference for me. But what I found is that, of the, I don't know, there's about 10 or 12 people that I pinged saying, hey, what would you like to see in the technology planning webinar? Would you like to be a panelist? Zoom fatigue setting in. Everybody's really busy right now. I get that. But what they admitted to is that they did appreciate this and they want us to keep doing it. A lot of banks really haven't gotten to where they're actually analyzing this using these columns that we have up here. That really, they're just kind of looking at it saying, hey, you know what? I feel like we ought to put that one in ours. This one, it's good to know. I hope the examiners don't do that when they come in to talk to us, that sort of thing. But the intended use of this is that it would really not only give us a paper trail for how we boil everybody's ideas down. And so maybe, maybe over here we've got a, current project that didn't come from one of these conferences. It came from the CEO or the chief loan ops officer or whatever. They're wanting to get in a new loan application that, may or may not rise to the level of helping us achieve our strategy. And so this gives you the ability to weight things. And again, that movie from 2016 talks a little bit more about how we suggest you go about analyzing these tactics so that you have a paper trail where you're documenting over here did not make it into the plan because of X, Y, and Z, right? And so that's the theory. Again, most community-based banks are just not finding the time to be that analytical, and their examiners and auditors are okay with it, which in my opinion is is the key, because you've got to strike that balance between the approach you're taking and how much time and resources you have to take that approach. Ultimately, though, you want to have a paper trail that documents why you ended up with those 3 lists: the vision, the strategy, and the tactical plan. And it's getting to the point now where if your auditor is asking you for a tactical plan, not only should you deliver them the plan, but you should also talk to them about how you came about creating that plan. How, why didn't XYZ make it into plan, whereas ABC did make it into the plan? So what I'd like to do then is introduce our panel. I feel like we're going to go ahead and start with Christy. And hi, Christy. Did Roger make it back yet? It looks like Roger did make it back. Excellent. That's great, Roger. Everybody, thank you very much. I'm very, very grateful the 2 of you volunteered to participate in this panel. And what I would like you to do, starting with you, Christy, is just kind of talk a little bit about, maybe introduce us to yourself, and then talk a little bit about your bank, your technology planning process. Let's not get into the nuts and bolts of what you're planning to do yet. Let's talk more about process now. So, Christy, I'm turning control over to you.
All right, thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me today, too. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share what we do internally and hope to learn a little bit from others today, too, as we go through the process. I know everybody's technology planning differs on size of institution and, the process flow. So my name's Christy McBride. I'm our Chief Operations Officer and also serve as our Information Security Officer at First Federal. We are about $430 million in assets with 9 branches. Currently, we outsource IT, so we made the decision to do that strategically about 5 years ago. So we have a managed services firm that we work with. They serve as our Chief Information Technology Officer. So I work in tandem with them from the ISOC. And basically our planning process, the bank has a business plan. So we all work together to come up with one big plan for the bank in general. And then obviously there's business units that flow up to that business plan, and information technology is one of those. So essentially I own that business unit as COO and ISO. So I will schedule time to meet with our managed services provider. And we basically talk through, okay, what are our risks? What are we seeing? I think Dan brings up a great point. With the spreadsheet and for the tracking, we can look to see, okay, what is on the radar of examiners? What are they looking at? Where might we see holes? One of the other pieces that we utilize is the financial services sector cybersecurity profile and their CAT assessment. So we go through that in detail and figure out, okay, where can we say yes? Where do we say no? Where do we want to be as an institution in general? Today, we live at baseline. We want to be evolving, but there's pieces and parts of that we're trying to fill in the gaps. So we work directly with the managed services firm. We come up with what we want our plan to be for the year. We are a fiscal year end, meaning we're a 6/30. So our planning is probably a little different. I know a lot of people right now are going through that process. For us, it's typically March, April timeframe to hit that 6/30 budget number. So we look at things in quarters. So each quarter, we basically put together a project plan based on risk for the institution in general. So as we're going through CAT assessment, as we're going through the financial services sector review, anytime that we have a no or something that we're trying to implement, we risk rate those and determine, okay, what poses the most risk to the organization today? And those are the things that we want to tackle first out of the gate. We then put together detailed project briefs that are taken to our IT committee for review and approval and ultimately go to the board. And then we get those on the schedule and track those in each of our IT committee meetings, which happen every other month. So in general, that's our process. We do have a budget that's set with those as well. It makes my job a lot easier in my seat because I know what those projects are going to cost and we know what those are. So I don't necessarily have to go get additional approval each time. We already know what those are. If they're already approved, then I'm good to go. So it makes it very efficient from my seat to be able to do that, get them easily approved and processed within our organization. So that is in general what we do here from project planning as it goes from IT perspective. I'd be happy to field any questions.
I actually had a couple questions myself, Christy, but I think we'll hold off on the questions for now, if you don't mind. Other than, I'm glad I ran away and got my, I don't know if you noticed, but I had to leave my office here because I don't have any pens here anymore. They all migrated out to the couch. But with that, I'd like to thank you very much, Chrissy. We're going to definitely circle back around, but I'd like to introduce Roger Chalkley. And Roger, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself to us and talk to us about your technology planning process.
Well, thank you for having me here today. I really appreciate the opportunity to share what Home Bank is doing in the area of technology planning. My name is Roger Chalkley. I'm in charge of the actually, my title is the Director of Information Technology, and work at Home Bank in Martinsville, Indiana. We're about 315 million, a little bit smaller than Christie's Bank, 5 branches, not quite as big formal process. We're a mutual bank, so a lot of the SEC and the quarterly planning, we don't have to adhere to. So it gives us a little bit more freedom. So usually we're a calendar year in. So usually about July, I start pulling up a Word document and start jotting down ideas of what I want to do next year, hearing different things from the staff and starting to get with that, meet with the IT team, and start discussing with them, what do you want? What do we need to put in the budget with it? And then we attend the infotex planning seminar every October to try and find new ideas of what we want to do. And one of the things we like to do is the senior management team with the IT steering meets with our core provider every November to do a strategic alignment, and the core comes in and discusses what they have planned, what they're doing. They listen to what we're doing and have plans, and kind of gets a little bit of cohesion of their understanding of what we want to do and how they can help us provide that. Then at the same time frame, we have a strategic planning session for the next year. We have a formalized strategic planning where all the officers get together and we develop the plan. Once we get all those pieces, we come back to steering and put in ideas that we want to include. We start throwing them up on the board, and then the ones that stick, we put in the IT tactical worksheet. We kind of use the tactical worksheet a little different. Instead of for planning purposes, we use it for tracking purposes. So every project that we're going to do, we tie them into the strategic alignment with one of the IT strategies, and put it in, and then we mark the progress of how we're doing it. It's a very good tool because when we're doing the planning, I go back to it. What have we got done? What have we not gotten done? Do we need to keep that on the plan? Do we need to scratch it? Or do we need to start with something new? Then after we get that all done, of course, when the loan area all of a sudden needs a project that we got to spend a lot of money, I put on the tactical sheet and then put on there why we got it on here and why it wasn't in there at the beginning of the year. But being in a smaller shop, I think people understand those things happen. We got to have this. We can't function without this. And all of a sudden, we've already got the budget in place. We got to do it. So we got to figure out how to do it. And we just do the documentation to make it look like we're planning. In addition to that, attend the cybersecurity seminar, kind of look at different things, look at what other banks are doing. We kind of listen. The IBA has the IT Officers Forum. We listen in that. And one of my always questions are, what are you planning next year? And of course, everybody goes, well, we're not sure yet. What are you planning? And then, of course, put an ear into the OCC. We're OCC regulated. What's the hot topics that we're hearing from them? What do we need to include? But the biggest exciting thing that I enjoy about the IT steering and the tactical planning process is getting the senior management excited about a technology feature that's fun to implement and not a regulatory necessity to implement. You know, mobile deposit, something exciting, something fun. We started implementing video conferencing last year. Thank goodness we did, because we were a little bit ahead of the game. It was interesting that it was embraced very quickly during the year, a lot more quickly than our tactical plan said it'd be embraced. But technology out of necessity always is the best technology, I think. So that's pretty much our planning process.
So that was a top down that became an everything up, huh?
Yes, absolutely.
But you looked wise when you're like, well, that's already in the town. Well, good for
Yeah.
you. Well, so I heard both of you in a very polite way say that you still have situations where new projects that are not in the tactical plan kind of butt their way in. Does the planning process, does it at least help with the awareness? Does management team at least saying, I know this isn't in the plan, and they're coming to the table justifying it a little more, or I mean, does that help?
I definitely think so. Sorry, Roger, for our purposes, you know, you do set out a budget, but we also know that there's always a contingency planning piece that we don't know about. So we try to factor in the unexpected because you don't know what may pop up throughout the year. Now, one of the things I've tried to do for my seed is to track those expenditures within the budget to actual. So every month I put together a budget to actual detail that shows what we pay from IT expenditures, and I show this was in budget and here's the amount that was not in budget. So I think it's a good reflective piece for us to get to an end of a quarter or end of a year and say, okay, what did we miss? What could we have done better or different to budget better for these items? So I think that's going to help us going into this next year as we review that.
And then you're returning to your plan quarterly. Am I hearing that right? That you're checking status on it. Roger, is that the same with you quarterly, or are you monthly, or? Okay, great. Well, what I'd like to do now, we've only got about 10 minutes left, and one of the you spoke, we listened our things is don't go over either. We're supposed to keep them short, and even on the long ones, we're not allowed to go over. So I should probably shut up. But Roger did bring up, hey, you know, one of the things I really like about these workshops is that I get to see what other banks are doing too. And I just wanted to make sure people are aware of this article. It's a little bit old, but it's T7, the trends with dashes in between everything there. Brian, if I don't know, I could probably Slack this to you, and maybe you can Slack it to the group here. But the reason I'm bringing this up is just because I want people to realize that the tactical plan alternative spreadsheet this time, those of us who are vendors of banks are kind of going through a mini situation of our own where a whole year's worth of conferences have been compressed into 2 months. And so we decided to produce the tactical plan alternatives after only attending 2 of about 4 or 5 conferences that we usually incorporate into this. And so the spreadsheet is full of a lot of compliancy stuff, but there's not as many, hey, what new technology should we be looking at? And so I just bring this up. This is an older article, but it lists all of our favorite annual articles that you might want to visit to get ideas as to what banks are doing. Jimmy Sawyer's, I spoke with him about 3 or 4 times. He always, I just really look up to him. Jim, your accounting firm, you know what I mean? They can give you ideas as to what banks are deploying as far as new technologies go. But anyway, so I just felt like this might be, and then we have an annual article, the Magnificent Seven, we call it, which is basically, this is of course from 2015, but it's just a list of the 7 trends. And usually that article also includes what banks are planning to do, at least our clients, in the course of the next year. And so I wanted to just kind of point that out as a resource. And then what I'd like to do is just with the rest of our time is just kind of pull and call to the attention a few of these tactical plan alternatives that we have listed here. And really, again, they're from 2 conferences, the OBL's IT Forum, which was a day-long, very similar to the Indiana Bankers IT Forum, for those of you from Indiana. I moderated. I'm very, very proud and honored to be the one that moderates it, and a co-moderator, by the way. John Waldman from SBS Cybersecurity is the other co-moderator. I'm learning a lot from him. What the examiners at least were talking a lot about, and again, this is very, very compliance oriented compared to what, if we would have been able to bring the mega conference and this technology conference in Ohio and a few of the other conferences in. But if you look at this, authentication practices are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there are quite a few of the things that were said at both conferences kind of center around how are we authenticating users. And so, somebody had suggested that we put multi-factor authentication on password resets. And are we looking at how that works? And what I'm hearing about or reading about is that, people are finding vulnerabilities in the reset page and they're able to leverage that and do some SQL injection attacks on that and that sort of thing. So should we have our auditors look at that and that sort of thing? But what I would like to do first is really give Christy and Roger the opportunity to point out what you saw in here. I did send this to them in advance. Of course, they're really busy and everything. But Christy, you had some trends that you noticed in here that I went ahead and recategorized the governance category, by the way, to just kind of help put them all in one place. But there was a lot said about Office 365. And by the way, the conference was 2 days after their first 4-hour outage. So I thought that was kind of an interesting, setup to the talk, where he was talking about how we got to make sure we protect ourselves from cloud, based applications. But Christy, what would you like to say about Office 365?
Well, first we had to laugh because there were at least back-to-back weeks where they had outages. So the ongoing joke was, rather than Office 365, it's Office 363. So we'll continue to see how many days that changes over the year. But we actually made the choice to move to Office 365 in June of 2019. So we migrated over fully by August of 2019. So for us, it was a relatively new platform. We started out on E3, and we wanted to figure out how do we fully leverage that technology to be able to eliminate some of the other technology expenses that we had in budget, because obviously Office 365, there's a lot of different tools and security pieces within that you can leverage across the organization. And it's pretty overwhelming. So, anybody who's been out there and looked at all the different pieces and parts that make up that platform, it's trying to drill down to figure out, okay, what really applies to our organization. And we did go back and use the financial services sector cybersecurity assessment, look at that, figure out kind of where our gaps were, and tie that in to determine what we could leverage out of O365 for us. So, we ended up moving from the E3 platform over to what they call business premium licensing, which really for us was no cost differential, but we were able to pick up some additional security features. So we actually integrated Intune. So we were able to migrate away from our mobile device management tool we had been utilizing and get that all into the Office 365 cloud. And then our big piece right now that, it kind of ties in also with multi-factor authentication is launching conditional access. Conditional access. So that has been a big piece of project that our managed services firm is working on. That way, essentially, we can protect because with the cloud, you can log in from anywhere. And we want to make sure that it's only authorized users from authorized devices that are logging into our platform. So we are in the throes of doing that right now and hope to have that project done by the end of this month.
That conditional access feature of Office, of Azure, and the whole authentication process there, really, it solves a lot of the problems that were brought up when I brought down the whole authentication issues list from the tactical plan. So definitely, and we're seeing a lot of banks migrating to Office 365. As a person who runs a managed security service provider, we're 24/7. Just want to point out that this year it's 366. This is a leap year, so we actually have to pay people 366 days. No, just kidding. But still, that was a great joke. I love that joke. So it's Office 364, so whatever.
Right.
But Roger, is there any of these tactics that you'd like to, bring up or highlight or talk about?
Well, the ones that I always liked are, as I said, we enjoy the ones that's going to give us new features and functionality for the bank rather than the regulatory and compliance and security features. You can get bogged down implementing them. I mean, it seems like that's all we do anymore, that you got to have some fun. You got to have a little enjoyment in doing the job. And that's what I always looked in there is, hey, are banks doing mobile deposit? Are they going to more online opening? How's the opening going? Are they doing paying through ACHs for opening new accounts? Or how's that going on? One of the things I saw was a company that was not looking at credit scoring when opening deposit accounts. They're looking at trends, and a very interesting concept. So yeah, that's what I usually look for in the spreadsheets, and unfortunately see a lot of regulatory compliance and a lot of security features.
And I mean, part of the reason why is because we had an examiner panel at the OBL forum, but you are right.
Yeah.
Patch length cycle is something that they're wanting everybody to justify. If you're scanning your systems quarterly, they want to know why aren't you scanning them monthly. If you're scanning your systems monthly, they want to know why not weekly. Your risk assessment's how you weed out the stuff you don't want to do, right? And so where does that your bank? What mitigating controls justify that? Fourth party controls. I've always thought about that. I always thought about how, hey, after a while we can end up in a circle, right? But it was discussed. It came up several times in that. Privileged account controls. One of the ones that I really have been concerned about, we actually created a movie on it. I'm actually delivering a talk on it in November. And this might be a little bit self-serving because your SIEM provider, your managed security service provider is the solution, or part of the solution at least. But the examiners were bringing up that I know we're in a pandemic here and we want to, trust people, but trust is not a control, and banks need to start having the conversation about malicious insider threats. And so we're actually, wanting to make sure that when we talk to our client, monitoring clients at least, that they're aware of how we can help out with the insider threat controls. Testing the CAT controls was a big one. The examiners are basically saying that we want you to be testing those controls. Now that's the last stage of maturity on the maturity, right? But Christy, you kind of brought this up too, where, circling back around to that CAT and making sure that not only are you, looking at where you should be evolving, but are we fully in compliance at the baseline level, right? So how you doing in that? You feeling good about that, or?
Yeah.
Good.
You just did our audit. We feel good.
Yeah. No, you're doing good in that because I checked. So, but yes. Ransomware, if you're not putting a ransomware scenario in your tabletop tests, you're probably going to get dinged on it in your next exam. And that was across the board. The DFI person in Ohio was saying that too. I want to talk about AI risk, but nobody wants to hear me. But you know, there are some vendors that we're working with. There's some applications that are leveraging neural networks, machine learning. You know, I feel like we need to start getting our arms around it ourselves and maybe start helping management, that it's not about robots taking over the world. What worries me is that it seems like a rhyme with 2001, 2002, 2003, when management was like, that'll never happen. Well, I'm not talking about robots taking over the world. I'm talking about incompetent AI losing data or screwing us up, right? Or vendors doing stuff with our data that we don't realize they're doing, right? And so anyway, enough. I get on my high horse there, but I'm hearing from Brian that it's time to wrap up our webinar. Christy and Roger, I really appreciate your input into this. I wish we had more time. I wish I didn't use so much at the beginning. But thank you very much for your participation. Any last words you'd like to say?
Oh, we appreciate you having us. It's very nice to be able to participate and go through this. And thank you for preparing this for banks. I think it is nice for somebody to go through and take all the notes. And while we all do that, we may not be able to attend every seminar. So this certainly helps us be better prepared.
Well, thank you, Christy.
And I want to thank you for doing the movies of these, because a lot of these are at the inopportune time, and I love going back and being able to see them. When you first started them, I missed one or two and really was kicking myself that I missed it. So now with the movies, I can go back and see it at my time. So thank you for listening to everybody and really providing a great, outstanding service to the banks of Indiana.
Thank you, Roger, and everybody. Thank you for attending. I guess I need to do this one thing that I think was a suggestion by Roger, but we always want to end. Don't forget, awareness is 9/11 to the battle. And thank you, both of you, very much.
Great information as always. Thanks, Dan, and thank you for joining us today.
Be sure to mark your calendars for December 10th at 9:45 Eastern Standard Time. The IBA presents an infotex workshop, Tech Shop, a virtual workshop for bank IT geeks. Go to my.infotex.com/tech-shop-2020